What's up guys, my name is Ace and welcome to my SCUF One review. In today's video we're going to be talking about each of the individual features on my SCUF One controller, what I like, what I don't like about those features, and then at the end of the video we'll go over my overall impressions of the controller. Let's get into it. I want to start this video off by saying that at the time of making this video I am not affiliated with SCUF in any way, so this is 100% my honest review of the controller and its features. So the first feature that I'm going to cover on the SCUF One is the SCUF Grip. Now for the pros, overall it's just much more comfortable than the standard Xbox One controller. Once my hands are in place on the controller, they don't slide around at all unless I want them to. I've never really been a fan of the Xbox One controller. I just feel like it doesn't really fill out my palms because I have slightly larger hands and I kind of have to squeeze the controller with my palms, and this definitely gets uncomfortable after several hours of gaming. The SCUF Grip definitely helps with this. It makes it so I don't have to squeeze quite as hard to keep the controller in my hand. It just fits there a little bit more naturally. Now, one big thing that I really like about the SCUF Grip is it's extremely durable. I actually tried right here to scratch as hard as I could with a quarter, try and scratch that grip off, and I can't do it. It's there forever. It's not going to come off on you anytime soon, especially not with normal use. So that's one massive pro to having the SCUF Grip. As for things that I don't necessarily like about the SCUF Grip, with my controller, this may be different for other people's controllers, but for mine personally, I feel like the SCUF Grip gets a little bit in the way of plugging in my mic adapter. So when I try to plug in my mic, I really have to find the perfect angle and I have to wiggle it around to be able to get it to plug in, and sometimes this takes me like a full minute to plug my mic in. And it's a little bit of a minor annoyance. It's not really a huge deal. I always end up actually getting the mic plugged in, but I don't know, I feel like there is an issue there that could be addressed. So other than that, I have absolutely no issues with the SCUF Grip. Alright, so now let's move on to the next feature, and that is the trigger stops. These work just as advertised, and they can definitely help you improve your ability to shoot a semi-auto weapon faster. It's also just more comfortable and more responsive because you're not wasting your time pressing that trigger all the way down when you don't really need to in a first-person shooter. Another thing that I really like about the trigger stops in the SCUF One is they're really easy to adjust or remove once you have the panel opened up, and the reason you might want to remove them is for like a racing game. You want to be able to press the trigger all the way down because that's typically your throttle, and with the trigger stop you would only have like half throttle. So you can easily remove the trigger stops and then put them back in, and I really enjoy that feature. One last thing that I like about them is they're completely hidden inside the controller, so you don't have a screw sticking out or anything like that. With the Xbox 360 SCUFs, there was a little bit of a screw that stuck out and it was a little bit ugly, but with these trigger stops, it's completely hidden. Moving on to the things that I don't like about the trigger stops, I really had to stretch once again to find something that I didn't like about this feature. But one thing that made me a little bit nervous is actually removing the side panels to access the trigger stops. I was a little worried that I was going to break the controller. It does take a little bit of a twisting of that plastic, and it is just plastic, so I felt like there were times where maybe I would break the controller. I haven't broken it yet, so it could just be me being a little bit paranoid. But there is that potential for a controller to break while removing these panels. Alright, so now it's time to talk about the big feature of a SCUF controller that most people will buy a SCUF for, and that is the paddles. The first big pro with the paddles is I honestly did see an instant improvement in my ability to handle certain situations in Call of Duty more effectively once I got used to the paddles, which took just a few hours. I can now jump shot while staying on target really effectively, whereas before I had to remove my thumb from the thumbstick, and it kind of threw my aim off, so that was a little bit annoying, but now I can do it perfectly. And also, I can actually knife people now, which I couldn't really do effectively before because I play on a tactical layout, so I have to move my thumb all the way over to the B button normally on a regular controller. And in close quarters combat, and when the time is really of the essence in those situations, it was really difficult to actually knife people. Now I'm knifing people all the time when I run into them face to face, and it works great with the SCUF controller. Another thing that I really like that I already kind of mentioned is it's really easy to get used to having two paddles. It only took me a few hours of constant jump shotting and knifing to get used to the paddles for good, and now I'm using it all the time instead of reaching over and pressing the A button or the B button to perform those actions. I can see how potentially having four paddles would be a little bit overkill and kind of difficult to handle and get used to, but that's just my thoughts on it. I could be wrong. I haven't played with four paddles, but I don't know. I feel like that's just a little bit too much complexity. The next thing that I like, and I was actually a little bit surprised by, was the durability of the paddles. I find that it would actually be really hard to break with normal use. You could potentially break them if you push it really hard to the side, but as long as you're pressing straight down on them, you're not going to have an issue. There's no room for them to twist or anything like that, and they are quite strong. Now, the final thing that I like about the paddles on the SCUF controller, and this may seem really minor, but it definitely does help me, and I really do enjoy this feature, is the texture on the paddles themselves. As you can see, the lettering on the paddle is actually raised a little bit, and you can feel the difference between where it says SCUF and where it says One, and then the bottom is just smooth. And this does make a big difference because it does require a little bit of leverage to press down that paddle. And if you're pressing at the top of the paddle, it does take quite a bit more pressure than it would to press the bottom of the paddle because you don't have as much leverage. So being able to feel where your finger is on the paddle and basically how much pressure you're going to need to press that paddle down, it really does help. As for something that I don't like about the paddles is I feel they can be a little bit uncomfortable over time for me and how I personally hold the controller. When I press the paddle down, there's a little bit of a pressure point sort of on the side of my finger right next to my fingernail, and it doesn't feel that great after a long gaming session of constantly jump shotting and knifing people. In my opinion, it would feel much more natural to maybe have the paddles angled inwards a little bit or just moved out to the side a little bit more because for me personally, it may just be that I have larger hands. I find that there is that little bit of a pressure point. Alright, so now that I've covered the features that I have on my controller, I want to talk a little bit about the other features and why I didn't get them. So first, the EMR or electromagnetic remapping feature. This is the feature that allows you to easily remap the paddles so that they can be used for different buttons, and you can do this really quickly. The simple fact is that this feature wasn't available when I ordered my controller about 2 months ago. I definitely would have gotten this feature had it been available though. Same thing goes for the Pro Grips. This is something that I definitely would have gotten on my controller if it were available at the time, but it simply wasn't. Now, as far as only getting 2 paddles instead of 4, I feel like I only need the paddles for things that are time sensitive and require you to have your right thumb on that thumbstick ready to go. For me, when I'm reloading, picking up, or switching weapons with the X button and the Y button, I never feel like I put myself at too much of a disadvantage by taking my thumb off the stick for a split second. And the reason for this is these actions take a bit of time to complete anyways, so by the time my gun is done reloading, my thumb has already been back on the thumbstick for a little while now. And same goes for picking up or swapping weapons. I feel like 4 paddles would just add a little bit too much unnecessary complexity for me personally. It may be something that interests you, but I don't like the idea of it. Now finally, I didn't get any SCUF thumbsticks, and the reason for this is pretty simple. I really like using Control Freaks, and I wasn't too sure if Control Freaks would be compatible with the SCUF thumbsticks, so I just played it safe and got the standard Xbox One thumbsticks at no extra charge. Alright, so now it's time to look at my overall thoughts on the SCUF controller. So the things that I really like about the controller are 1, it actually improves my game in certain situations in Call of Duty. Number 2, it has excellent build quality. I can see this controller lasting me for several years. Number 3, all of the features work just as advertised. There's nothing gimmicky that they claimed would work that didn't work. Everything that you see in all the advertisements work exactly as advertised. And finally, it's just more comfortable in your hand than a standard Xbox One controller, and that's a big deal when you spend a ton of time playing video games. Alright, so those are all the main things that I really do like about this controller. Now I want to talk a little bit about what I don't like, or just the things that I feel have a little bit of room for improvement. So first up, I do have that slight discomfort in my fingertips due to the paddle location and how I personally hold the controller. I feel like this is something that could be improved on with future designs. Number 2, it is quite difficult for me personally to plug my mic into my controller. Like I said earlier, this could have just been a little bit of an anomaly with my specific controller since I haven't heard of this issue from anyone else yet. And really, it's not the end of the world. It just takes a little bit of extra finesse to get that mic plugged in. And the final thing that I would consider to be a con with this controller is it's a little bit on the pricey side for a controller. This particular build that I have, which isn't even really maxed out by any means, cost me around $180. But I do have some justification. My justification is I spend hundreds of hours each year with a controller in my hand, so I'll definitely be getting my money's worth by having the best controller on the market. So before we wrap up this video, I just want to say something very important if you're thinking of buying this controller to improve your game. Having a SCUF does make certain actions much faster and easier, and it will help you a ton in very specific circumstances in a game like Call of Duty. It's very likely that you will win more gunfights that you otherwise wouldn't have won with a regular controller, but remember this is simply a tool and don't expect to suddenly become an MLG pro just by using a SCUF controller. It's not going to make you a smarter player. So in all, if you're a hardcore FPS gamer and you have the money, I highly recommend this controller. I've been using mine for just over a month now and I'm very pleased with the purchase so far. For those of you watching this that already own a SCUF One, please feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions on the controller in the comments below. I'd really like to know what you guys agree with me on and maybe even disagree with me on, and I feel like it would provide extra insight for people that may be looking to buy one. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.